Do you think knitting is too hard or too time consuming to fit into your busy life? Or maybe you have heard or thought that it's kind of outdated. Well, I'm here to bust those myths wide open today and show you why knitting might just be the creative outlet that you have been searching for. Hey, mamas, welcome back to Knit Your Stress Away, your podcast for all things beginner knitting, and also about fitting it into your busy life so that you can reap the benefits of this incredible craft in your life too. Let's dive into today's episode. Welcome to Knit Your Stress Away. Are you a mom who feels overwhelmed, craving a creative outlet, but unsure where to start or how to fit it into your already packed day? I have dedicated this podcast to help you discover practical, guilt-free self-care strategies through the calming practice of knitting. I'll help you break free from the overwhelm, quiet the noise and comparison of social media, empowering you to pick up your knitting needles instead and embrace moments of rest, creativity, and mindfulness. Hi, I'm Nadine, a mom, wife, and passionate knitter. I first learned to knit as a teenager from my grandmother back in Germany, but for some reason, I put my needles down in my 20s. It wasn't until 2020, when everyone was searching for ways to ease the anxiety of the unknown, that I picked knitting back up, and something amazing happened. I found peace and joy in the cozy, calming rhythm of knitting, and now I'm so excited to share my practical tips and habits with you so you can reclaim your time, recharge, and rediscover the things that bring you happiness. It's time to ditch the endless scroll on social media and focus on what truly matters, your well-being. So if you're ready to take control of your stress, ditch overwhelm and social media comparison, rekindle your creativity, and recharge with a hobby you love, this podcast will guide you every step of the way. Take a deep breath, grab your knitting needles, and let's start creating a life with less stress and more joy, one stitch at a time. Hey mama, are you dreaming of learning to knit so that you can have the amazing benefits of this craft in your life too? You might be feeling unsure about how to start, but I've got you covered. Download my free Essential Tools checklist to see exactly what you need to get started with ease and confidence. If you want knitting to be your new way to relax, I'm here to help you make it simple and stress-free. To grab your checklist now, go to thenittingmamas.com/checklist and kickstart your knitting journey today. Hey there, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm Nadine Medina, your host here on the Knit Your Stress Away podcast. And today, let's talk about some common myths about knitting that you may have, but that you definitely shouldn't have, because they're not true. They're all myths. So I want to clear up some of these misunderstandings that might be holding you back from actually picking up knitting. And with some of them, I've definitely been there. I can tell you that. As you may know, if you've been listening to this podcast, I learned knitting when I was like 14 or maybe 15. I don't remember exactly, but it was from my grandma in Germany. And she taught it to me because, it was just what she was doing. She was knitting all the time. She was making sweaters for me and beanies and all kinds of things, and for, my family. So it was just natural. I was hanging out with her a lot. I went to a kindergarten near her house. So I was actually going to her house after kindergarten every day. And I just kept doing that throughout my teen years as well. And she was always, showing me what she was doing. She taught me how to crochet and she taught me how to knit. And it's funny. I was just thinking okay, I did not learn to knit in kindergarten. And it's funny because my kindergarten was literally just down the street. I walked to it with her from her house, but also my high school. So that's when that happened. I'm all kinds of confused today. But long story short, it was just something that she taught me because she enjoyed it, she loved it, and it was something fun that we did together. But over the years, I just kind of forgot about doing it. I did it for a little while, even into my 20s, but then I don't know if it was me getting busy or if it was me really thinking, this is kind of, a little old-fashioned, or maybe this is not something that people do these days. And I honestly don't remember people doing it. Like, I was knitting and people were like, oh, you know how to do that? So I'm not 100% sure, but I definitely had some things happening, some misunderstandings, some myths in my mind, because otherwise it wouldn't have taken me till all the way to 2020 to finally pick it up again, right? But when I did pick it up back later in life, I realized that knitting is actually one of the best ways to relax, unwind, and be creative. And you do not have to have any of the stress, minus the maybe, occasional frustration of when you do learn something new, you may run into a little bit of frustration, but it's always worth it in the end. But I did knit for the longest time. So as a busy mom, I didn't even realize it could have all those benefits for me as well, other than just, oh, this is fun and I'm making things, right? When I was a teenager, when I was in my 20s, I didn't really think about it any other way. Like, who's stressed during those years, right? I hope no one that age, but as a busy mom, it's a whole different story. And I want to kind of, talk about these common things that I do hear from people. I remember when I first started talking about knitting on my Instagram, the most comment, like the biggest comment that I got from people, it was like over and over and over. They were looking at the little tutorials that I was making, and it was like, oh my God, I wish I could do that. But I couldn't. And that's actually myth number one. It's too hard to learn. So is that actually true? I did not used to think this, obviously, because I learned it when I was so young. I didn't even think that it could be hard. I was just doing it. So for me, it's a little bit hard to think about that way because I'm like, no, it's not. But of course, something is not hard when you know how to do it. But with any new skill, there's going to be a learning curve. But you only really need 2 basic things, maybe 3, and you'll be off and running and you can start practicing. And of course, as you know, anything that you practice over and over, you will master in no time. And the 2 things that you need to know is how to cast on a project so that you actually have stitches on your needle, and then you need to know how to knit the knit stitch. You then also can learn how to do a purl stitch, which is very helpful because it's the mirror or the backside of the knit stitch, so it will come in handy, and I highly recommend you do that. But you can get away with just casting on, knitting the knit stitch, and then casting off. And those 3 things are so much easier to learn than you think. With that, you can make scarves, you can make beanies, you can make headbands, you can make dishcloths, you can make even a cardigan, like I did. I think I talked about it in the last episode. I made an entire cardigan out of garter stitch and without any decreases or increases. The only other thing that you also need to know is how to seam, but that is super easy to pick up as well. If you can learn the cast on and the knit stitch, you can learn how to seam. And you may already know that because it's really the same thing as, sewing something together. And most of us know how to do that. But I want to just take that kind of like fear out of your thinking that you might think, oh my gosh, I'm not going to touch this because it's just too hard. Or you just sitting on the sidelines thinking, I wish, but I just couldn't. And you don't even try. It would be such a shame because really it isn't that hard. It looks much more complicated than it actually is once you have the yarn and the needle in your hand. And speaking of which, you heard me talk about it in the beginning. I am here to hold your hand through that very first phase where you're like, what do I even need? I know I need needles and I know I need yarn, but which kind of yarn? What kind of needles? Which size? What size yarn? The material? Which one should I get? And what else do I need beyond that? So I got you covered with the free checklist. Go to download that at theknittingmamas.com/checklist. And you can literally grab all that within a day or 2, and then you're ready to go. All right. So myth number 2, it takes too much time. Let's talk about time. So one of the most common objections that I do hear from busy moms especially is, I just don't have time for any hobby. I can't add anything else to my life at the moment. It's just crazy. But I have to actually counter that with a question. Actually, that wasn't a question, was it? That was not a question. That was a statement. Anyway, I do have to counter that with, do you take any time for yourself? Because if you don't, then you will 100% need this or another hobby that you can work into your life. Let's talk about this. Here's the thing. This craft, this hobby, does not have to take hours and hours of your day. It's one of those magical things that you can literally do in small pockets of time. And you can still reap the benefits. So it could be 10 minutes while the kids are napping. It could be a few rows while you're waiting for your coffee to brew, or while your kids is at soccer practice or dance practice. That's when I knit. It is super portable, super flexible. You do not have to carve out large chunks of your day to enjoy the benefits, because you can literally take it anywhere. You can take it in the car if you're not driving, on a road trip, if you don't get car sick. You can take it to a doctor's office, and instead of scrolling on your phone while you wait in the waiting room, you can knit a few rows. It is so amazing, right? And I actually find that knitting in small bursts throughout the day is just as rewarding and helps me feel calm and, put me back into like a better headspace than if I knit, for 30 minutes or an hour at a time, which really only happens, I have to admit, during the evening when I finally sit on the couch and when I maybe watch something with my family. I knit then, and that's a little bit of a bigger chunk that I get. I also sometimes knit while my kids are doing school, which is online, so they're at home doing it. And that is a great time too. I can help my kids while I'm knitting. Obviously, all of these are sort of mindless patterns or projects that I'm doing so that I can do them while I'm also, having my mind possibly somewhere else. But that is definitely not a concern, the time issue. It may be a little bit in the beginning when you are actually learning, but you can even do that in little increments of 15 minutes to 30 minutes a day. Set it aside, get up a little bit earlier, watch some videos and learn how to knit. It's going to be so amazing. Believe me. Myth number 3, knitting is too expensive. Okay, I get it, because there's so much amazing yarn out there, fancy knitting tools, fancy yarns. There's those interchangeable needles that are like $100 or $200 for the set. It can seem like it's quite the investment. And then what if you don't do it? What if you don't like it? What if you're not using it? And then you just wasted all that money. I completely get it. I was actually there when I first picked it up again, because I was like, I remember liking it, but that doesn't mean that I'm still liking it, right? But here's the thing. You do not need all that fancy stuff to actually get started. What you really need is a basic pair of needles. And I do recommend getting kind of like a decent pair. Don't get like the super cheap ones, because then your experience is not going to be great. And then you may just throw it away and say, oh, this sucks, right? So do get a decent pair. I have my favorite ones linked in the checklist that you can download. And get yourself some good yarn that isn't feeling scratchy, because once you put the scarf on, you don't want to be all like, ooh, this is not fun, right? Or while you're even knitting it. But you can get some really amazing yarn. It could be a cotton. It could be my personal favorite called Hue and Me, which is a mix of acrylic and wool. So it's a nice blend that also doesn't cause any allergic reactions, at least not for me. And I'm pretty allergic to wool, so that's a good thing. And it's super soft, and I love knitting with that yarn. It's actually my highest recommendation for anybody who is brand new to knitting and who's just starting out. All of that is in the checklist. Go ahead and grab that, theknittingmamas.com/checklist, so that you can just get started and see that it is not a huge investment. And if you're getting the tools that I recommend for you, you actually are going to have a great experience with your knitting. So myth number 4, knitting is outdated. Yeah, you may still think that, even though Instagram is literally full of like Gen Zers who are knitting. It's so crazy. It's amazing, actually. I love it. But maybe you're thinking that knitting is like this old school thing that, grandma did, and that's it. And no one else is doing that. And it's just a weird hobby. And there may be people who think that. But let me tell you, knitting has had a major comeback in recent years. It's trendy now. But it's versatile too, because you can create anything with knitting, and you can even dabble in crocheting, because there's tons of that on the interwebs and on social media as well. The amazing things you can create are just endless, right? any pieces from cozy blankets to fashionable scarves, home decor, like I see it all, and it can all be made in knitting, and some of it is crocheting. There's endless patterns, styles, ways to personalize your projects, fit your style. There's brand new knitting brands that are just now popping out with new yarns, new dyeing techniques, new tools. Like it's absolutely amazing. So you are literally in the right spot at the right time to get started in this amazing hobby. So that's it. My 4 myths that I hear about all the time that you may have also believed since you're listening to this podcast, and you may have thought one of these things. Maybe not all of them, but you may have thought one or the other. But I definitely hope that I've cleared some of them up for you today, and that I showed you that knitting is not too hard. It doesn't take too much time. It's also not too expensive, and it's definitely not outdated. It's a wonderful, relaxing hobby that can easily fit into your busy mom life, and it can bring so much joy and stress relief in the process. And I really, really encourage you to give it a try if you haven't yet, and you will find that it's much simpler and much more rewarding than you might think. Please remember, I will be sharing more resources soon to help you get started on your knitting journey. So please stay tuned for that. It's coming out very, very soon. Until then, grab some yarn, breathe, and listen to my dog in the background. And get started. At least gather your tools, and you'll be well on your way to your first project and to really reaping the benefits of this amazing craft. I am so thankful that you tuned into today's episodes of Knit Your Stress Away. I hope you got something out of it. If you did, please go ahead and share it on social media. You can tag me at @theknittingmamas_ on Instagram. And I would love to shout you out on my profile then as well. Can't wait to connect there, and come on over into the Facebook group so that we can hang out more and I can show you what I'm currently working on, and vice versa. You can find the group at theknittingmamas.com/group. All right. I will talk to you really soon for the next Knit and Chill. It's not the Knit and Chill Friday. It's the Knit and Tell Friday coming up this Friday. And until then, I hope you have a wonderful week. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks so much for hanging out with me on today's episode. I hope you're walking away with a bit more inspiration and a few ideas to make your self-care a priority. If today's chat gave you a little boost, I'd love it if you could leave a 5-star review on iTunes. This helps other moms discover the podcast and start finding more calm and creativity in their day as well. And don't forget to join us over in the Knitting Mamas community on Facebook by going to theknittingmamas.com/group. Thanks again, and remember, you deserve time for yourself to recharge and feel your best. Catch you next time on the Knit the Stress Away podcast.